That night, the suburban sky loomed thick with clouds, ominous harbingers of a storm. Madison lingered by the living room window, a glass of red wine swirling lazily in her hand, her eyes wandering among the dim blurred streetlights that flickered in the darkness. Jack was, as always, absent, another business trip, extending until the weekend. It was just her and Ethan, in the expansive, chilly house. A faint sound wafted down from upstairs, piercing the heavy silence. Madison flinched, placing her wineglass on the table, straining to listen. The noise was unfamiliar. Neither the sound of footsteps, nor the soft beat of music emanating from Ethan's room. A strange curiosity tugged at her, pulling her toward the staircase. The glow from Ethan's room spilled through the slight crack in the door. Madison walked slowly, her bare feet gliding over the cold wooden floor, the soft creaks echoing beneath her. She paused at the doorway, intending to knock and announce her presence, but then she stopped. Through the narrow gap, the scene inside made her freeze. Ethan was sitting. On the edge of his bed, his shoulders slightly hunched, he held something in his hands that she couldn't quite make out. The dim light of the bedside lamp cast his shadow long and stark, creating a blend of the real and the surreal. Yet it wasn't the sight that captivated her. It was the expression on his face. His features were weighed down by a sadness she hadn't seen before, his eyes fixed intently on the object in his hands, as if he were battling an intense internal struggle. She knew she shouldn't be standing there, yet the vulnerability drew her in. Etched into his face was the fragile pain so openly displayed, rooting her to the spot. It was a side of Ethan she had never seen, one she doubted anyone else had ever witnessed. Madison. Ethan's voice broke the silence, snapping her back to reality. He had noticed her standing there. Madison froze, unsure of what to say, her fingers gripping the edge of the doorframe awkwardly. His gaze met hers, a mixture of surprise and a flicker of embarrassment. The object in his hands, a worn photo frame, was hastily set down. The bed lay there, an unspoken barrier, as if he wished to shield it from her gaze. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude." Madison finally managed, her voice trembling, betraying her effort to steady herself. Ethan drew in a deep breath, his eyes flitting away from hers before returning to the frame. "It's fine, I didn't think you'd come up here. What's the photo of—" Madison took a step closer, her tone softening. She didn't want to push him, yet the image of him just moments ago had sparked a profound, almost instinctual curiosity within her. Ethan hesitated, his silence stretching as if he were weighing his next words carefully. Whether to respond, he finally picked up the frame, his thumb brushing over the faded wooden edge. "It's my mom," he said, his voice low, almost distant. I don't know why, but I've been thinking about her a lot tonight." Madison felt a quiet ache stir in her chest. The restrained pain in his words resonated with something deep inside her. She stepped closer, her gaze falling on the photograph. It was of a young woman, her smile gentle as sunlight, though her eyes carried an unmistakable weight of introspection. Ethan looked so much like her. Her presence resonated not just in his features, but in the quiet melancholy mirrored in his gaze. "You don't have to hide how you feel around me," Madison said softly. "Sometimes sharing can make things a little easier." Ethan let out a faint, bitter laugh, a smile flickering across his lips before vanishing just as quickly. "Do you really believe that when you don't share anything with anyone yourself?" His words struck her like a sudden gust of wind, leaving her momentarily speechless. Ethan's piercing grey-blue eyes locked onto hers as if, peeling away the layers she had meticulously constructed for her own protection. The air between them shifted, laden with an indefinable weight. It was neither anger nor judgment that lingered in his gaze. Rather, it was something deeper, a sensation, that rendered the space between them forbidden. They had both inadvertently stumbled into a realm they had not intended to discover, yet neither could summon the will to depart. Madison re-entered the living room after her brief exchange with Ethan, but her thoughts remained tethered to that moment, refusing to release its hold. He sat on the bed, his eyes cloaked in sorrow, as he stared at the photograph, lingering in her thoughts and stirring something deep and unsettling within her. She poured herself another glass of wine, sank into the couch, and allowed her memories to transport her back in time. She recalled the first moment she met Jack, a man overflowing with confidence, ambition, and an undeniable magnetism that could captivate anyone. Their romance was swift and intoxicating, and within just a few months he proposed. At that moment, Madison believed she had found her forever. She discovered her forever, yet marriage gradually unraveled the layers of their whirlwind relationship, exposing truths she had not foreseen. Jack's obsession with affection and his relentless pursuit of high expectations permeated not only his career, but also everyone around him, including her. Once Madison had been vibrant and passionate, a woman brimming with life and creativity. Writing had been her escape, her joy, her means of connecting with the world. However, life with Jack slowly stripped away those vital elements. He dismissed her writing as impractical, a frivolous pursuit that had no place in their structured life. Nights once spent with her pen and paper were replaced by dull evenings at his corporate dinners, or long hours listening to him discuss projects she couldn't bring herself to care about. Bit by bit, Madison felt herself fading, becoming the ideal wife, in Jack's eyes, but a stranger to her own reflection. Ethan entered her life not long after she married Jack. He was just 18 at the time, moving in with his father. In the wake of her mother's passing, Madison recalled with striking clarity the moment Ethan first entered their home. His eyes were puffy from tears, yet his expression remained a carefully crafted facade of detachment. She had made attempts to connect to close the chasm that lay between them, but Ethan remained aloof, as if fearing that she might attempt to fill the void left by his lost mother. As time unfolded, Madison came to understand that both Ethan and Jack possessed a shared, burdensome trait, an overwhelming repression of their feelings. However, unlike Jack, Ethan lacked any means of emotional release, shouldering the weight of his grief alone. His father's expectations loomed large, a relentless pursuit of academic excellence and professional aspirations, creating an impossible standard for Jack's notion of perfection. Ethan poured his heart into meeting those demands, yet Madison observed how each attempt eroded his essence, leaving behind a hollow shell of a boy on the cusp of manhood. She recalled a night from years past when she had found Ethan alone in the backyard, the hour late, and the soft glow of the street lamp casting a gentle light on his silhouette as he strummed a weathered guitar, the melody drifting into the night. It was soft, melancholic, and hauntingly beautiful, the first time she witnessed Ethan revealing something raw and real. Yet when she called his name, he abruptly halted, packed away his guitar, and retreated to his room, as if he had been caught in an act of transgression. From that moment, Madison began to observe him more intently, uncovering the tempest of emotions that lay beneath his stoic facade, a silent battle yearning for expression. With a sigh, her gaze fell upon the wineglass in her hand, a silent acknowledgement of her understanding of Ethan's unvoiced feelings. Than anyone else, for she was ensnared in the same struggle, burdened by the heavy cloak of expectations, gasping for breath, in a life not of her own making. The distinction lay in her surrender. She had ceased to battle accepting this reality, as her fate convinced it was all that awaited her. Yet Ethan stood apart, a beacon of potential still holding on to a flicker of hope, however faint. It was that very spark that captivated Madison, drawing her gaze in the stillness of the living room, where she came to understand that she and Ethan shared more than just a home. They shared a pain, a profound sense of being trapped between their true selves and the expectations of others. In that moment, she realized their relationship had ventured into uncharted territory, where the boundaries of right and wrong faded into a hazy ambiguity. This only intensified her attraction to him, as if an irresistible gravity was pulling them closer together. The following night, Madison awoke suddenly from her slumber, a heavy sense of unease weighing on her chest, the clock on her bedside table ticking away in the stillness. Peruse at the hour of 2 a.m. Yet despite her relentless efforts, sleep remained a distant dream. Her mind was ensnared by the suffocating reality of her existence, haunted by Jack's aloofness, and the melancholic gaze of Ethan from their earlier exchange. The memories spiraled endlessly, a torment she could no longer endure. Seeking solace, she resolved to venture into the kitchen for a cup of tea, yearning for the tranquility of the night to soothe her troubled spirit. As she made her way down the stairs, a subtle noise from the living room piqued her curiosity, accompanied by the soft glow of a lamp. Spilled out, she caught sight of Ethan slumped on the couch, his back to her shoulders, hunched as if burdened by the weight of the world. He still wore the same light grey t-shirt from earlier, his hair slightly disheveled. Beside him on the coffee table rested a nearly empty bottle of red wine. Madison hesitated, caught in a moment of indecision between retreating and stepping forward, but ultimately she moved. "Can't sleep either?" she asked softly, her voice careful, almost fearful of shattering the fragile quiet. Ethan flinched at the sound, turning his head toward her. In surprise, however, his expression quickly softened. "What about you?" he replied, his voice raspy, as if he'd been engaged in a lengthy conversation with himself. She crossed the room and settled into the chair opposite him. "The night feels unusually long," Madison said, her gaze drifting to the bottle on the table. "Are you okay?" She wasn't sure why she asked, but the need to understand Ethan felt increasingly urgent. Ethan let out a faint laugh, though it carried no humor. "Too much on my mind," he admitted, his fingers tracing the edge of the table. He sat at the table as if seeking some form of stability. "My dad called tonight, his voice strained, as he urged me to switch my major to business. Naturally, he believes it's the sensible option, but that's not what I want." Madison felt a pang in her chest. She wasn't taken aback by Jack's insistence, yet the despair in Ethan's tone struck her harder than anticipated. "Did you tell him?" she inquired, leaning in slightly, her gaze locked onto him. Ethan shook his head, a wry smile playing at the edges of his lips. "What's the point? He never listens." Never has the sentiment of inadequacy loomed so large as in his eyes. To him, I am merely a failed imitation, a shadow of his brilliance. Madison gazed at Ethan, his eyes overflowing with the anguish and fury he had long concealed. In that instant, she no longer perceived a young man before her. Instead, she recognized a soul burdened by the crushing weight of unattainable expectations, a warrior engaged in the same silent struggle she had endured for years. She reached out instinctively, her hand gently resting upon his quaking one. "You don't have to mirror your father," she whispered. "You need not navigate your life according to his blueprint. Once this life is yours, Ethan." Her words made him pause. Ethan looked down at her hand, her fingertips barely brushing against his skin. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Madison didn't pull away, and Ethan didn't flinch. The space between them grew heavier, charged with something unspoken and undeniable, like a storm building on the horizon. "Madison," Ethan whispered, his voice trembling not with fear, but with the weight of a decision he was still grappling with. Part of him wanted to step back to protect the fragile, the boundary that separated them, yet another part of her hidden deep within yearned to bridge that gap. Madison understood she ought to withdraw her hand, retreat upstairs, and let the moment end there. But Ethan's gaze, filled with pain and a desperate need for understanding, anchored her in place. It awakened something within her, a loneliness she had long sought to bury. In that instant, they transcended their roles as stepmother and stepson. They became two wandering souls, each seeking a place to belong. As Ethan leaned in, the hesitation melted away, and he gently placed his hand over hers. His fingers curled slightly, as if reaching for comfort. Madison remained still silent, yet her breath quickened when their gazes locked. In that moment, time appeared to fade away, leaving only the electric stillness surrounding them. "I know this is wrong," Ethan whispered, his voice barely above a murmur, a soft admission of his struggle. "But I can't help myself. I can't stop thinking about you." Madison felt a tightness in her throat, her words trapped between thought and emotion. Before she could restrain herself, she found herself leaning closer, drawn in by the warmth emanating from him. His body closed the gap that had once divided them, and then their lips met, tentative at first, then urgent, a release of every suppressed emotion that had been building between them. In that moment, Madison knew they had crossed a line they could never uncross. Yet deep down, she also understood that this wasn't merely a fleeting lapse in judgment. This was the beginning of something she couldn't yet name, something she wasn't sure she was ready to face. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow. Golden glow bathed the quiet living room as Madison stirred on the sofa, a delicate blanket wrapped around her. For a brief instant, she entertained the notion that it had all been a dream. Yet the lingering warmth on her lips from Ethan's kiss the previous night and the frantic rhythm of her heart when their gazes locked shattered that illusion. He had slipped away before she opened her eyes, leaving her in a haze of uncertainty. What thoughts occupied his mind? She dared not confront him or even herself. Instead, she immersed herself in the flurry of chores that awaited her around the house. In a frantic attempt to bury the memories of the previous night, her thoughts were abruptly shattered by the sharp chime of the doorbell. Upon opening the door, she was greeted by her best friend Lily, vibrant and full of life as ever, balancing two steaming cups of coffee in her hands. Yet Lily's keen gaze scrutinized Madison's face, a hint of suspicion flickering in her eyes. "You okay?" "You look different," she remarked, tilting her head slightly as she examined her friend. Madison quickly shook her head, forcing a feeble smile. But Lily was not one to let matters slide so easily. Not long after the sound of footsteps on the stairs heralded Ethan's arrival, Madison froze in place, her heart pounding in her chest as if it might burst. Ethan's gaze flickered toward her, a hint of awkwardness crossing his face, though he quickly masked it with a practiced nonchalance. Lily turned her sharp eyes on Ethan before shifting back to Madison. She remained silent, but the air between the three of them thickened. As Lily silently observed the tension Madison was desperately trying to conceal. Ethan grabbed his keys and mumbled with a swift farewell. The door clicked shut behind her, and Lily settled beside Madison, her face a tapestry of curiosity and suspicion. "You can't hide from me, you know," she declared, her voice slicing through the stillness like a knife. "There's something happening between you and Ethan, isn't there?" Madison's lips parted, ready to refute the claim, but the words eluded her. Lily's gaze was sharp, as if she could penetrate the flimsy facade Madison had attempted to place over the truth. I don't know what to say," Madison stammered. finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Lily straightened up, her usually carefree demeanor replaced by a rare seriousness. She placed a firm hand on Madison's shoulder, her voice soft but unrelenting. "You know this can't continue, don't you? What if Jack finds out? What if Ethan gets hurt? Have you thought about the consequences of all this?" Lily's words hit Madison like a thunderclap. Everything she had been trying to bury in her mind surged forward, unleashed by the force of Lily's questions. She felt as if she were standing on the precipice of a revelation, at the precipice of a cliff, gazing into a chasm brimming with consequences she had yet to fully grasp. Madison found herself at a loss for words. Just as she was about to respond, the front door swung open, and Jack stepped inside. His presence enveloped the room like a sudden chilling gust of wind. Madison sprang to her feet, her eyes wide with astonishment. "You're home early," she stuttered, struggling to maintain her composure. Jack offered a smile, yet it lacked warmth. His eyes were sharp and penetrating. "Work wrapped up sooner than expected." He replied, his tone steady, though it carried an undercurrent of something unspoken, an undercurrent of something much darker. Madison felt Jack's gaze linger on Lily, before sweeping across the room, absorbing every detail. There was something unsettling in the way he surveyed the surroundings, as if he were assembling a puzzle she couldn't quite grasp. "Where's Ethan?" Jack asked, his voice cold and even, causing Madison's pulse to quicken. "He just stepped out," Lily replied quickly, attempting to dispel the tension. Yet as soon as she spoke, Jack's eyes locked onto Madison with a sharp intensity. "I feel like I've missed something," Jack said, his tone low and dangerous. Madison forced a smile, but it felt as though every layer of her was being stripped bare under his scrutiny. Lily quickly muttered an excuse to leave, and slipped out the door, leaving Madison alone with Jack. Once Lily was gone, Jack stepped closer to Madison, his expression darker than she had ever seen it. "You're hiding something, aren't you?" he asked bluntly, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "There's nothing," she replied, but her voice wavered, betraying her. Jack stood there for a moment, his gaze piercing into hers, as if he were unearthing the truth hidden within her words. "You and Ethan," he began, his voice dropping to a whisper laced with an unsettling edge. "There's something off, isn't there?" Madison remained silent, her stillness echoing louder than any confession. Jack's jaw tightened, fists clenching at his sides. "I trusted you. I believed you would never betray me, but now I'm not so sure." Madison felt as if her chest were collapsing, her breath shallow and erratic. She couldn't deny it, but she couldn't bring herself to admit it. The air in the room grew thick, suffocating. Jack turned away, walking to the window, his gaze distant and hard. "If what I'm thinking is true, then everything between us ends here." His words struck like a hammer, leaving Madison reeling. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to salvage the pieces of the life she had so carelessly shattered. In that moment, she realized that everything was spiraling out of her control. The storm she had feared was no longer brewing. It had arrived, and it was only just beginning. Madison stood frozen in the living room as the door closed behind Jack. The echo of his footsteps faded, leaving her alone in a silence that now felt oppressive. His final words replayed in her mind, sharp and cutting, a cruel reminder that nothing could undo what had happened. Everything between her and Ethan had crossed a boundary, and now the consequences loomed closer, like an inevitable tidal wave crashing toward her. She sank onto the sofa, gripping the fabric of the cushions as she tried to, steadying her breath. Yet fear, guilt, and a profound emptiness swirled within her, refusing to release their grip. Madison was unaware of how long she had been ensnared in her thoughts, but when she finally raised her gaze, the light outside the window had faded to the muted grays of dusk. A part of her yearned to flee, to abandon it all, while another part understood the necessity of confronting the truth. She could not remain hidden forever. Ethan returned as the night enveloped the world outside. He entered the house and found Madison sitting still on the sofa, her eyes lost in contemplation. Red and puffy, immediately sensing the heavy tension in the air. Ethan hesitated. "What happened?" he asked, his voice tinged with worry. Madison looked up at him, and as their eyes met, a surge of emotion rose in her chest, overwhelming and impossible to suppress. "Jack knows," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan stood still, his body rigid with shock. He moved closer, sitting down beside her, but careful not to touch her as he normally might have. "What did he say?" he asked cautiously. Madison shook her head, trying to hold back the tears threatening to spill over. "He didn't say it outright, but he knows something's going on between us. He warned me. If it's true, everything is over." Her voice broke as she turned to face Ethan, her eyes wide with fear. "And he's right. This isn't right. It never was." Ethan didn't respond immediately. His fists clenched tightly in his lap, his gaze fixed on the floor as he processed her words. "Madison," he started, but his voice faltered, unsure of what to say. "You don't have to say anything, Madison." Her voice, now steadier and more resolute, cut through the tension. "We were wrong from the start, Ethan. I knew it then, and I know it now, but I let myself be led by feelings I shouldn't have had." Ethan turned to her, his eyes filled with a pain that was almost unbearable to witness. "You're trying to push me away, aren't you?" he said, his voice a low roar. Madison drew in a deep breath, forcing herself to stay firm. "Not because I want to, but because we have to. I've already crossed too many lines. I've hurt Jack, I've hurt myself, and I'm terrified I'll end up hurting you. You too, Ethan." Her words lingered in the air, a palpable heaviness that filled the space around them. Ethan felt the urge to argue, to defend what they once shared, yet he couldn't dismiss the undeniable truth in her voice. They had crossed a line, and now all that remained was the aftermath. The following morning, Madison made her choice. She gathered a few essentials into a small bag and left a letter on the kitchen counter. In it, she conveyed to Jack her need for time and space to gain clarity about everything. There were no excuses, no elaborate justifications, just a simple apology. As Madison stepped out the door, a sharp, deep ache pierced her chest, yet alongside it lingered a faint sense of relief. She recognized this was the right decision. Ethan, standing at the foot of the stairs, watched her leave in silence. Though he yearned to call out to chase after her, a part of him grasped that this was the only path for both of them to rediscover themselves. Once Madison drove away, Ethan turned back to the stillness of the house and retreated to his room, settling beside the old guitar. He had neglected for so long that each note he played became a vessel for emotions he struggled to articulate. Madison drove away without a glance back, feeling the weight of Ethan's gaze lingering on her. Yet she resolutely refused to turn around. She needed this distance this time to heal the wounds she had inflicted on herself and others. Deep down, however, she understood that Ethan had changed her forever. He had rekindled the essence of who she was, a reminder of the dreams she once cherished before becoming someone she hardly recognized. Time slipped away, and in the stillness of her chosen solitude, Madison began to rediscover herself. She returned to writing, granting herself the freedom to feel, to create, to embrace the emotions she had once buried in fear. Though she didn't reach out to Jack or Ethan, they lingered in her heart as integral pieces of a narrative that had profoundly shaped her life. One late summer day, a letter from Ethan arrived, brief and unadorned, yet overflowing with sincerity. Thank you for helping me realize that. At times, liberation is found in the act of release. I wish for you to discover your own liberation as well. As she concluded the letter, tears streamed down her face, silent and unexpected. She delicately folded the letter and tucked it into a journal, a sanctuary for her most cherished memories, a testament to the journey that had led her to this moment. Then she stepped forward, not alongside Jack, nor with Ethan, but alongside herself. It was a new path, one where she could reclaim all that had slipped away, hope, freedom, and the love she had always owed herself. To herself,